This is Anti-Imperialist Front TV news for the week ending March 1st, 2025. Historic day in Greece, February 28th, 2025. The most massive demonstration and general strike in the modern history of Greece. More than 1 million people gathered in Athens to demand justice for 57 people murdered by the state in the train massacre at Tempe which took place on 28th February 2023. People gathered in 300 towns in Greece and all around the world to demand justice for the people murdered by state policies in the train massacre at Tempe. It was a general strike for all over Greece in which millions of people participated. The police attacked and arrested many people. The murderers are state and capitalism, the New Democracy government and EU imperialism, with agreements on their monopolies and the company Hellenic Train all being responsible for the massacre. Millions of people in Greece gathered and will continue the fight for justice. We will never forget and never forgive. Resistance to isolation in the prisons of Turkey continues. Fascism in Turkey's attack on revolutionaries in prisons continues. Revolutionaries under isolation torture resist these attacks using hunger strike resistance. Fascism aims to separate revolutionaries from their comrades' thoughts and psychologically finish them off with the isolation attack. Against these attacks, 8 revolutionaries are on hunger strike. Sercan Ahmet Aslan, Serkan Onur Yılmaz, Mullah Zincir, Bakıcan İşik, Yurdagül Gümüş, Mithat Öztürk, Hasan Ali Akgün, and Ali Araca are the names of those who continue their hunger strike resistance. They demand the closure of these new types of isolation prisons and their transfer to where their comrades are. PKK leader Öcalan announces laying down arms and dissolving the organization. Imprisoned for more than 20 years in İmralı prison, PKK leader Öcalan recently shared a letter through his MPs in which he declared that the PKK had reached the end of its life. The letter was read out live on the air, in which it was stated that a new peace process with fascism would be initiated, that arms should be laid down and that the organization should be dissolved. The armed reformist group PKK has been seeking ways to negotiate with fascism for years. This process, in which surrender will be achieved under the name of peace, will not result in the liberation of the Kurdish people, but in more captivity. As with every political organization in history, peace negotiations with states have brought nothing but liquidation and destruction, and it will not bring it again. In previous peace processes, the state has again gained while the popular forces have suffered a great loss of both military and political power. The imperialist powers such as the USA, the EU, and the UN, which have already made statements of support for this statement, are actually proof of who will benefit from this process. It is a betrayal that will go down in history that the fascist Erdogan and Bahçeli, who have personally shed the blood of the Kurdish people, are being presented to the Kurdish people as peacemakers. The only way to peace to be achieved is through destruction of fascist forces and their patron imperialism. Destruction continues in Syria. The jihadist gang brought to power in Syria with the support of imperialism continues its service for the disintegration of Syria. The Jolani gang, which continues its pogroms against minorities, does not hurl a single stone against Israel. Israel, as always, continues its Zionist occupation plans by producing excuses for its own security. It continues its de facto occupation in the south of Syria by increasing it every day. Zionism has increased its military presence up to the edge of Damascus. In addition, in order to settle permanently, it evacuates the regions and establishes military bases, just as it did in Palestine. In addition to its own actual military actions, it is arming the Druze population living in the region. Israel uses the contradictions of the peoples in the region for its own interests. Israeli Zionism does not respect the slightest human values of any people in the world and does not support their struggle for freedom. Their support is aimed at contributing to their own genocidal and Zionist policies. Zelensky and the Trump government at the White House. Zelensky, the leader of the Nazi government in Ukraine, recently met with Trump, the leader of imperialism. For the interests of imperialism, the Zelensky government, which first turned the Ukrainian peoples against each other and carried out massacres in Donbass, then caused the deaths of countless people in the war with Russia for NATO. It plunged its country into the IMF quagmire and lost some of its lands to multinational company. Now Ukraine, which is used by and indebted to US imperialism, is forced to give up its underground resources for debt repayment. The collaborator neo-Nazi government in power is responsible for all this. In the meeting, which came on the agenda all over the world, Trump and his team gave a lesson to all peoples in the Oval Office via live broadcast. This lesson is how disgraceful the end is for those who collaborate with imperialism. It is a historical demonstration of how they will be treated after the expiry date. It is now certain that the neo-Nazi government in Ukraine will lose. The peoples of Ukraine have lost thousands of people for nothing in the name of NATO at the hands of a fascist government. Grup Yorum screened their documentary 8 Days in Donbass in Minsk, Moscow and Lugansk. Grup Yorum organized the anti-imperialist delegation against NATO and visited Belarus, Russia and Donbass with a documentary screening at the end of February. In Minsk, a documentary screening was organized by musicians together with the Belarusian Anti-Imperialist Collective and the Anti-Imperialist Front. The audience gave the musicians 2 standing ovations. The 50 people who came to the screening in Minsk had the opportunity to ask questions to Grup Yorum and to talk to the musicians in person during the intermission. The screening was held in the same format in Moscow and Lugansk. All participants were deeply impressed by the ideological steadfastness of Grup Yorum, the clarity of their thinking, their courage and confidence in victory. The main thing that the participants in the events received was the hope for the people's victory over fascism and imperialism. And that is Anti-Imperialist Front TV news for this week. For news outside the mainstream, follow us on social media. See you next week.